United States condemns Houthi blocking passage of humanitarian aids to Ma'rib. Houthis continue to commit atrocities in Abdiya amid odd international silence. Houthi ongoing offensive in Ma'rib aggravates suffering of internally displaced people. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English News with me, Shazad Abdelbay. U.S. State Department condemned the failure to deliver humanitarian aid to Abdiya, accusing Houthis of blocking access to it. The U.S. State Department called on Houthis to open safe corridors for civilians and the injured in Abdiya. The State Department said Washington condemns the escalation of the Houthi militia in the Yemeni government of Ma'rib and its clear disregard for the safety of civilians. In addition, U.S. State Department said Houthis must stop their attack on Ma'rib, calling on them to comply with international demands and end the conflict in Yemen. U.S. Special Envoy to Yemen Tim Litterking condemned the recent Houthi escalation towards Ma'rib, Shabwa and Al-Bayda, denouncing the massive Houthi siege on Al-Abdiya district. The Houthi militia launched a campaign of raids and in Abdiya mass arrests district. According to local sources, dozens of Houthi gunmen stormed homes of people and assaulted women, children, and the old people. The sources confirmed that the militia kidnapped dozens of tribesmen, including wounded people. The sources stated that the militia members beat the women and the old to force them to give information about the tribesmen. Houthi siege on Abdiya has taken a critical humanitarian and military turn. The Houthis are subjecting about 35,000 civilians to a very difficult humanitarian situation, which asks the international community for an immediate action. More on the story is within this report.
After nearly a month of the Houthi siege on Abdiya, the United Nations said a word to ease the situation. According to David Gressly, the United Nations Humanitarian Coordinator for Yemen, the escalation in fighting in recent weeks resulted in a devastating impact on civilians. Gressly called on all parties involved in the fighting to agree now to a cessation of hostilities in Abdiya, to allow for the safe passages of civilians and workers, and for the evacuation of all those wanted in the fighting. The statement made by the United Nations official, according to experts, didn't address the real problem in Abdiya. The problem is that the district is under Houthi unjust blockade for nearly a month. There are 35,000 civilians inside Abdiya who are facing a real genocide because of the Houthi siege. United Nations said that the movement of aid to those people is extremely restricted. Among those people, there are 17,000 who are extremely vulnerable because they moved to Abdiya for refuge. Abdiya is a district in Ma'rib Governorate, which is the last stronghold for the government in northern Yemen. The fighting in Ma'rib displaced some 10,000 people in September alone, the highest monthly figure so far this year. Ma'rib city had about 30,000 inhabitants before the war, but has seen its population swell to hundreds of thousands by internally displaced people from other fronts. According to official figures, Ma'rib hosts 2.2 million people. These facts about the escalating fighting in Ma'rib and Abdiya in particular send a message to the international community that the Houthi march should come to an immediate halt. Fears are mounting that the poor population in Abdiya may face a grim future out of the lack of food, water and medicine. This comes along with Houthi ballistic missiles that are fired indiscriminately upon their homes and shelters. The rebels are trying by all means to capture the strategic district, and the situation in Abdiya is alarming. The United Nations' recent call for opening passages is not enough. More international pressure should be enforced on the rebels to end their hostilities and to reach for peace in Yemen.
In the same context, other sources stated that the militia executed young men in cold blood under the pretext of resisting them. Himayah rights organization said the militia is carrying out revengeful actions against the residents of Abdiya. The rebels launched extensive campaigns and brutal crimes were carried out, including murder, assassination, robbery, and bombing of houses. Continuing with Abdiya, where sources stated that dozens of families fled their homes, several human rights sources called on the United Nations to hold the Houthi militia accountable for the crimes they committed against civilians and to open an independent international investigation on these crimes. In addition, sources confirmed that the militia cut off communications and internet services from Abdiya. Internally displaced people in Ma'rib are living hard conditions. Their camps are void from basic necessities. They lack food, clean water, and medicine. More on the story is within this report.
Displaced people in Ma'rib keep suffering due to the overcrowding in camps. According to data from the United Nations Office for Humanitarian Affairs and the International Organization for Migration, overcrowding in IDP sites poses a safety risk. More than 17 fires were reported in the displacement sites, especially in the city of Ma'rib and Ma'rib al-Wadi. This is attributed to overcrowding in displacement sites, insufficient equipment, and the different ways people adapt to the situation, such as using wood for cooking in densely populated places or batteries to generate electricity. These data show that between January and July 2021, more than 52% of the displaced in Ma'rib moved within the district, with the escalation of attacks and shelling on the city of Ma'rib, which led to more civilian casualties. More than 110 people were injured and killed between April and June, the highest number recorded in the governorate since 2018, according to the International Organization for Migration. The data of UN organization shows that the proximity of some camps to the front lines exposes them to multiple displacement and increases their levels of vulnerability. While the number of times families moved during the conflict is undetermined, and the resettlement process is depleting the family's resources, as people are moving in Ma'rib now to safer places, raising concerns about the limited resources available to families, the cost of displacement, and increased vulnerability as people end up staying close to conflict zones. Reports indicate that tensions are rising between the displaced and their host communities. About 774 IDPs fled from Al-Rakaza area in Ma'rib al-Wadi to Al-Jaba area due to threatening messages from tribal groups. There were also reports that community members obstructed the establishment of water networks that provide water to the displaced and migrants. This reflects the increased risks and the experience of social tension and highlights the pressure on the individual, family, and community resources. Humanitarian reports cautioned that the commitment to societal cohesion was a critical adaptation mechanism for Yemenis before the conflict, in light of the weakness of state institutions and deteriorating services, and this helped the individuals through family, kinship, tribal, geographical, or other ties. And this interdependence led to the sharing of financial support and shelter, fuel, food, water, and companionship. But the conflict witnessed an increase in the effects associated with needs and resource constraints. The report stated that the lack of resources and the increase in needs led to a change in the ability of Yemenis to share resources, which affected social networks and seemed much narrower and more selective. Whereas IDPs were once seen as worthy guests, today they are seen as a threat to available resources. This is likely to be the situation across Yemen, but Ma'rib is particularly affected because it was the Mecca for displaced people and is now a hotspot for conflict.
The Houthi militia renewed their shelling on populated areas in Hais south of Hodeidah. Local sources reported that the militia fired their medium machine guns at civilian homes in the city. The shelling caused panic among civilians, including women and children. Still in Hodeidah, where a number of Houthi militia were killed and others injured, media sources reported that the movements of the militia were spotted south of the city and the joint forces fired on them. In Al-Durayhimi, Hais, and Al-Tuhaita, joint forces responded to the Houthi fires that targeted civilian properties. Governor of Hadramaut announced the arrest of a terrorist cell of 5 members. The governor indicated that the leader of the terrorist cell provided critical information on plots to destroy vital facilities, such as the central bank, the security and police headquarters, military camps, and the headquarters of the local authority. Massam Project for Demining announced the removal of 1,274 mines during the second week of October. The number of mines cleared on October totaled 2,720, bringing the number of mines cleared since the start of the Masan project so far to more than 281,000. Coming next, Amadouar education in Hais faces major challenges.
راتب الواحد 120 ألف والكيس الدقيق ب18,000 والكيس السكر اليوم ب20,000. كم يعني بيعطي هذا الراتب كامل كيس سكر وكيس دقيق؟
المواطن اليمني يعيش في أزمة إنسانية وغذائية مؤلمة من غلاء الأسعار وفحشة الأسعار وغلاء الصرف والعملة الأجنبية في البلد.
حالتي احنا حالة لما خرج لما ندير احنا شلقينا ما نقدرش ناكل الأكل داخل ما احنا بحاجة صعبة.
Welcome back. Educational facilities in Hais are facing real challenges. The following report sheds light on how the students and staff manage such challenges.
Education in Hais lives a painful reality and a miserable situation. Damaged schools, dilapidated and overcrowded classrooms, which threatened thousands of students' lives by the fact that roofs could fall on their heads. This made local authorities launch an urgent appeal to remedy such dangers.
Students study outdoors and under the sun in worn-out classrooms, in addition to the lack of chairs and other teaching aids. This is why we call in the local authorities and all organizations to pay attention to the school in Hais because of the damage caused to students.
6,000 students study in these dilapidated classrooms. We appeal to concerned organizations to intervene quickly to save the educational process so as not to cause disaster for classrooms that are about to fall on the students' heads.
Students in more than 9 schools sit on bare ground in open classrooms which lack chairs and simple education elements. For students to take their lessons under the hot sun, some classrooms became filled with rainwater, threatening the lives of students with epidemics.
The volunteers who covered the shortage due to the displacement of teachers. We have been teaching students for 4 years now without any compensation. We must get paid even if it's in small amounts. We appeal to the concerned authorities. The health condition is deteriorating. The classrooms have become swamps and filled with mosquitoes. We ask them to at least improve the health aspect.
Students take up their lessons without enough time because of the dangers opposed in their lives. This makes them vulnerable to significant protection concerns, especially in such schools that have become unqualified and unfit for teaching and accommodating students.
5 classrooms full of students who come from their homes and come out of school full of mud. What education are we talking about when we are in schools that are not prepared for teaching? No chairs, no classes, nothing. Students come to learn, but schools are not qualified to teach, and we do our duty to try to teach them. We want solutions for classes where this is not considered education.
These schools in Hais were known for generating successful generations throughout its educational history. In recent years, however, everyone noticed that these schools haven't got the attention required from authorities and organizations concerned with education. 7 years of an absurd war. 7 years doubled the burdens of Yemenis. 7 years of education destruction. Future generations are shattered mentally and physically, and everyone seems to turn a blind eye over them.
Houthi rebels use all resources to secure their illegal win in the battlefronts. They use children as a tool in the war zone by brainwashing and sending them to front lines. More on the story is within this report.
Houthi militia has been committing unprecedented crimes and violations to human rights at all levels and in all forms since they gained control over the capital Sana'a, violations that affected and abused men, women, property, the environment, and children. Child abduction cases have increased recently in areas under Houthis control. The Yemeni Coalition to Monitor Human Rights Violations has issued a report documenting 215 abductions and enforced disappearance cases of children during the reporting period. Parents accuse the Houthis of abducting their children and forcing them to join fighting fronts without their parents' knowledge or consent. The Houthis are physically killing Yemeni children with weapons, but are also harming them mentally by raising an extremist generation on grudges and hatred. Children who live in government-controlled areas have their houses and schools targeted by missiles, mortars, rounds, and explosive-rich drones. Houthi militias are deliberately committing these atrocities against Yemeni children and civilians. Houthi aggression in targeting liberated cities and areas populated by displaced children and women with ballistic missiles and booby-trapped planes to the aggressive approach of the Houthi group in the absence of its logic of peace as demonstrated by these practices. Those who suffer in Yemen are the civilians more than the military, and this is against all humanitarian organizations and the laws recognized in the laws of the United Nations to protect civilians and children. Childhood in Yemen is being subjected to the worst violations by the Houthi militia, as those who do not die with their ballistic missiles will die from the mines that they randomly plant in roads and residential neighborhoods. Children who are in the Houthi militia's controlled areas are not spared from the terrorism of the fascist group, as it is establishing summer camps to attract children, train them and enroll them in its ranks, taking advantage of their poverty and ignorance, recruiting them and pushing them into the lines of fire, and returning to their families as dead bodies.
Angry protesters marched in Lahj Governorate against failure to stop economic deterioration. Citizens in Al Anat city cut off a main road for a few hours and closed shops in protest against the collapse of the national currency and the high cost of living. Several banks in the capital Sana'a, which is under the control of the Houthi militia, are facing the danger of closure. The militia removed assets of these institutions and restricted their banking activities. Sources said the militia started taking steps to seize the money of 14 major merchants and control 2 of the commercial banks they own. To the temporary capital Aden, where the Central Bank of Yemen announced the suspension of 54 banking companies. The central bank said the action was taken after the institutions failed to comply with exchange laws, warning other companies and citizens against dealing with them. The National Committee Against Coronavirus announced 14 new cases of the COVID-19 in 6 governorates. Also 2 deaths were recorded, plus 26 recovered cases. With the current updates, the total confirmed cases are 9,526, including 1,804 deaths and 6,054 cases of recovery. Here's a reminder of the main headlines. United States condemns Houthi blocking passage of humanitarian aids to Ma'rib. Houthis continue to commit atrocities in Abdiya amid odd international silence. Houthi ongoing offensive in Ma'rib aggravates suffering of internally displaced people. This is the end of the news. Thank you for watching.